Hello, my name is Chris Krieger, and this is the Razer Nabu. I've been wearing the Nabu for about 2 weeks now, and I'm going to give you my 2-week impressions, my review of the retail version. I believe they refer to it as the 1.5 version. I was able to pick up the new version at a little bit of a discount because I had the original beta version. The beta version came out about a year ago, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. I did a quick review of this as well. I was super hyped about it. I was really looking forward to the Nabu. Everything about it sounded great. It was a new smart band at a lower price that would allow me to do fitness tracking and a little bit of smartphone tracking as well, on a budget through a very reputable company, Razer. So I picked it up. This is the old version. The clasp was, excuse me, one that would clip over here. Not too bad. There was a single button that showed a screen that would scroll somewhat slowly. A lot of rubber on the outside and then some hard plastic on the inside. Fairly small area of soft rubber down here on the bottom where it would have to open up and go around your wrist. It seems over the year since I used it, the back of it here did crack. Probably some sort of dry rotting or something like that, because it was only worn for about a month before I gave up on it. Moving to the new one, I'm going to take it off my wrist here so you can get a better view. It's a little prettier with the green in there and the hard plastic. You can see there's a much bigger gap here for the soft area, and that makes it a lot easier, a lot more flexible to get over my wrist. I always felt like I might break the old version. This one I'm still a little concerned when I slip it on that I might overextend it, but so far so good, no big problem. They also improved on the clasp. It is now so that there's a little magnet in there, and when it comes together it clips together. The only downside I've found to this clasp is that I'm a fairly hirsute man. I have some hair on my arm. This likes to grab some of those hairs every now and then and pluck them right out. It's not very comfortable. But this can happen with a lot of different watches, so it's not really a big point against it. It's just a minor annoyance. It still has the ability to twist off the clasp and put on a different size. So there's 2 sizes for each band, and there's 2 sizes of band. So it's a nice material, but it feels like the same material, which to me says if there's damage to this one after not being worn very much for a whole year, what does that say for this one if I was to wear it for a full year? It seems like using the same material is just going to end up having damage to it, so I don't have much confidence in that in the long run. The screen is clear. It's very nice. I can get the time to show up for you. It clicks through just like the old version. You can see your steps, you can see your distance walked and calories and activity time. The button is now on the side instead of on top. I'll talk a little bit more about the button later in the video, but for the most part it works the same way, and it works fairly well. Compared to the old version, there's less functionality on the band itself. The old version, when you hold in the button, it goes through a series of options: sleep mode, do not disturb, and power and resetting. I just turned it off. With the new version, if you hold the button, I guess I'll do it right side up for you, you get a stopwatch functionality similar to other fit bands, which is not very accurate because the time you're holding it is time that you're losing when you're stopping the stopwatch. But that's the only function you get holding the button on here. You don't get all those other options that are on the old one for the do not disturb setting, for the sleep setting. Sleep is automatically done on here, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So it seemed to me like a step backwards in functionality to take that away. You now access those options through the computer. You hook up the cable to it to charge it, and you can access those options from there, and that's how you reset it, and a few other options. You do not have the option to do not disturb from the band that I'm aware of, and you do not have the option to manually set the sleep function. The cord is a little different. In the old version, you had to open up the band, you had to generally remove the clasp, but you can see right there is where the charging plug would plug in. That's not great. That's considering this is how it sits. You do have to pretty much remove that to charge your band. Now, the cable has this little clip that sits over. You can see the two little metal pieces there. That's where it sits over now. And it actually clips into it. I have the cable over here. It has those little things, and it clips around the band, and that's how it connects. And then it's just a USB cord. It is fairly short, but what do you need, really? It's going to sit right next to your computer when it's plugged in. Talk about sleep a little bit. No, we'll get back to sleep. The reason I said, as far as I know, for something like Do Not Disturb function is because the manual does not have much to it. The manual is very short. It tells you how to put it on and start it up. And that's about it. It relies on the app to get further. You download the app. They have a new version of it. That does also seems a little bit less, maybe. It shows you your fitness functionality. It shows you firmware and if you need to upgrade, things like that. Update, upgrade, whatever. And any apps you can download, which right now there basically aren't many. I think the website shows about 16 different apps, and many of them do the very similar things. Many of them are restricted to notification functionality type of things. So if there is a way to do not disturb without taking my phone out, I'm unaware of it. I haven't Googled it. I shouldn't have to. It's not intuitive to figure out. And if it isn't there, then it's a little disappointing that the beta version had that. And now if I want Do Not Disturb, I have to pull my phone out of my pocket, which is the whole point of wearing this, is to do that less. Let's talk a little bit more about the functions that it does. Notifications work well most of the time. If I get a text message, it would usually vibrate and let me know I have a text message. Talking about the notifications, there's two options for display, just like the beta version. You can choose so that when it registers the turning of your wrist, it shows you your screen, and then if you have a notification, you could shake your wrist to make that dismiss. The other option is to, and these are separate options, so I'm explaining it in a way that makes sense, but there are ways that don't make sense. The other option is the screen never comes on unless you hit the button, and then if you have notifications, pressing the button again dismisses the notification. You could theoretically have it so that turning your wrist shows the screen, pushing the button dismisses the notification, or pushing the button shows the screen and shaking your wrist dismisses the notification. That's the least logical combination. I was disappointed there are not more options. For example, I feel like there should be an option so that if I get a notification, it just displays. It shouldn't need me to turn my wrist. It shouldn't need me to push a button. I should have the option that if I get a notification, I'm going to look at my wrist. And if I don't, it fades in the allotted time anyway. You can set how long before your screen fades. So just show it to me. I want that option. Then I could turn my wrist and look at it and hit the button to dismiss it, or shake my hand to dismiss it. With turning my wrist to show the screen, I'm constantly showing it. I talk with my hands sometimes. I might carry something. I might put my hand out for something, and the screen's just constantly flicking on, flicking on, flicking on, flicking on. Even not considering the battery consumption, which I'm sure is a little bit more to some extent, it's annoying. Just constantly this thing lighting up on my wrist, only because I'm moving. So there's that. Occasionally, a notification would not get through. I intentionally left my phone on vibrate so I could feel when I was getting notifications and make sure they were coming through. And occasionally I would get a phone call sitting at my desk at work, and the phone would vibrate in my pocket, but this would never go off, ever. That's only happened a few times, but obviously there's some kind of disconnect, and the band was not telling me there was a disconnect. It just wasn't working. There's also a little bit of annoyance, and I understand this happens maybe for other devices as well, but if my phone rings and both are going off, and this is my fault for leaving my phone on vibrate while this is vibrating as well, dismissing one does not dismiss the other. So if I push the button on here to dismiss the call that's coming in, to ignore it, essentially, my phone will keep vibrating. Conversely, if I push the side button on my phone to ignore the call, stop it from vibrating, this will continue to vibrate. So if you have both set to vibrate, you must ignore both. It's a little annoying. Let's see. The connection, for the most part, it never really disconnected as far as I knew, except for those notifications that I didn't have come through and a weird syncing issue, which I'll also get to in just a minute. The only time it ever told me it dropped connection was at work. I would leave my phone on my desk and walk into our kitchen snack area, which is separated, those two sections, by a concrete wall. And that concrete wall was enough to kill the signal enough that this told me, hey, signal dropped. Okay, cool. It has memory in it. It remembers my steps and things like that. It doesn't need to be connected at all times. Let's talk about the battery. The battery on this is awesome. The battery is much better than it was in the beta version. The beta version lasted a few days. This lasts a solid week at least. When I got it, it was at 80%. I decided not to charge it all the way and just wear it and see what happens. It lasted, I got it on a Sunday. It lasted until the next weekend. I think it was still at like 20% when I decided to charge it to full. I charged it to full and wore it until today, a good 8 days, and it was at 15% today when I decided to also charge it up again. And right now, when I charged it, it got up to 73. After only a few minutes, it's saying it's at 67%. So I think once you've charged it, it has a little bit of trouble accurately telling you what its battery is. But once it's going for a few minutes, it probably figures that out and does a good job of reporting it. That's another thing, is it's much better at reporting the battery than the old one was. Using the app, you can just bring down your notification center, basically, and it shows you your battery levels. And it'll tell you there with the Nabu what its battery level is. And I didn't want to focus on that with that camera, but 67% right now. It'll probably last at least a few days. It's great. The battery is awesome. It definitely outlasts the battery on my phone, even with less usage. So one of the big reasons to get one of these types of things for people is the fitness aspects of it. The fitness aspects on the beta version were terrible. There were times where it was telling me I was burning 3,200 calories in a day or something like that, over 3,000 calories in a day when I work a desk job, basically. I sit at a desk and I work on a computer. I was not burning that many calories. If I was burning that many calories with the food I was eating, I would be extremely thin. And let me tell you, I'm not. I'm not extremely thin. That's not a thing that was happening. This one is much better about it. Today it says I have walked 3,316 steps, which is probably fairly accurate, 1.2 miles, about 1,800 calories, and an active time of 3 minutes. I've been very active today. It was a work day. But it's still not entirely accurate. It does not have a heart rate monitor. It does not have GPS. All of its data is coming directly from the accelerometers and the technology that's in this. Now, the technology in this is wonderful. It's great. And it's able to at least guess based simply on movement. But it's kind of outdated by itself at this point. There's plenty of other devices that can use GPS or at least a heart rate monitor to tell me when I'm active. This tells me I'm active based on its motion. So if it's in consistent, constant motion over a period of time, then it thinks I'm active, which is a pretty good indicator, but not perfect. Conversely, the automatic sleep function is at a certain time of night. I think it's like 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. Or maybe it keeps a pattern, maybe. It decides you're in sleep mode when you are not in motion, or not very much in motion, because it tries to also register how restless you are. The sleep function is actually pretty cool. It works much better than the old automatic function that was on the beta version. But they did take away manual, as far as I'm aware, setting it into sleep manually. It's also weird for me. I'm used to, when I'm wearing a watch, taking it off when I go to sleep. But I wore it when I was asleep, and the sleep data was interesting. But inaccurate. I would be sitting, I'm a gamer. This is by Razer. For gamers, by gamers, right? I'd be sitting playing a video game into the late hours, especially on weekends, up till 2 a.m., and I would look at my wrist, and it decided because I was sitting still that I was asleep. Obviously, I was not. If it had a heart rate monitor or something else, it would probably be able to tell that it wasn't asleep. But by itself, it's inaccurate. In terms of step count, I found I was getting steps while driving. One of the biggest things was last weekend I went to a restaurant with my parents, and my mother has one of those Fitbits that hangs from your clothing. Fairly accurate. We had about the same amount of motion, but I had, I think, 900 more steps than her by the time we got to the restaurant. By the time we left, I had a few more, because this was registering all the movement I had while I was eating. So I was sitting still, but I was moving my hands, I was cutting things, I was doing all this movement. It thought I was moving around. I mean, it was. It was. I wasn't. So I got several steps that way. From what I read, the Nike Fuel Band is no longer for sale because one of those independent studies, or a couple independent studies maybe, found that some of these bands that use accelerometers are actually less accurate than just using your phone. Just using your phone's accelerometer and GPS in your pocket, in your purse, is more accurate. So I can't say I strongly recommend this as a fitness band. It's not horribly inaccurate like it used to be, but if you're serious about it, I would look into something else. If you're just looking for something casual on a budget, maybe this will work for you. It's not too bad. One of the big problems I had with it, I realized today, was the syncing. I assumed that it would just sync that data every day, but it wasn't doing that. So I looked at my phone earlier to see what my data looked like to kind of prep for this. Think, hey, I'm going to tell them about my days going by. And the app has actually not synced that information. So I have today's. It synced today's data. I'll try to get my computer to show it, but it really doesn't want to. So there's today's data. If I go to yesterday, see if it did. Come on. Alright, there's yesterday. Zeros, except for sleep. And this is the case for the last 14 days. Apparently I had not forced it to sync by opening the app on Wi-Fi for not 14 days, for 12 days. 10 of those days were completely lost. I didn't know this was going to happen, but at some point today I hit the button on this, and when you hit a button, often if you have extra notifications, it'll show you the time, and then it'll move over to the next notification. You have to dismiss notifications individually. I forgot to mention that. This was the case in beta. It's still the case. It's kind of annoying. There's no way with a single button to dismiss multiple notifications. There's no UI for that. There's no experience where that can happen. But it lost all this data. It told me it was full today. Memory full, where a notification would be. I didn't know that was going to happen. Apparently, I thought it had taken all 12 days. I looked at the app. I was like, oh, it hasn't synced for 12 days. I better make it do that. So I tried. It said it was syncing. It said it was syncing for an hour. I let this sit on top of the phone in a Wi-Fi environment, and it only synced a day and a little bit of the next one. The next 9 or 10 days were gone, and then today's was synced. So I lost a lot of data because of that. Apparently syncing just didn't happen. And I don't know if that's because I didn't open up the app, or because I've been using my phone in iOS 9's battery saving mode, the energy saving mode that prevents apps from background operating. So maybe that was the case. But without that, my phone battery goes much quicker. That iOS 9 functionality is nice, and if they don't play nice together, that's a shame. And it might just be that you have to open the app every night and let it sync every day. Let it get that information. But then is it going to pick up the information after you go to sleep? Like, it picked up all my sleep data, but it didn't pick up the fitness data. That seems really weird to me. It seems very off. It seems flawed. But yeah, that was a big issue, and I just realized that today, just before recording. Very, very upsetting. In terms of other apps, there really wasn't much. Like I said, there's supposed to be 16, but there's so little to do with that. You're supposed to be able to eventually control your camera and your music from the device, but I don't see how that can be. It's not done yet. That's a big thing. They released the hardware with software that's incomplete. I realized they wanted to get out there. They wanted the masses to get a hold of it and start to give their feedback, and so they can improve it. But your product should be done. You should have all of the functionality out there that you're going to advertise. And honestly, one of the big things I have with this is they made the choice to move the button to the side, which I mentioned, but they kept the choice to use a single button. I don't understand with this form factor why they didn't add more buttons. I mean, sure, that changes the design drastically. That adds more functionality to the software. That pushes back a lot of development. But it would have made the device so much better. Imagine if I had just had 2 more buttons. If I had buttons I could move through a list of notifications. If I had buttons that instead of whatever gestures they're going to try to invent to control music, I could scroll through my music or skip through my music with those buttons. There's so many extra things they could have done just by adding a button here and a button here. Even shifting this down one and adding 1 extra button, they could have had the interaction of pushing one, pushing and holding one, pushing the other, pushing and holding the other, pushing both together, pushing. There's so many more possibilities. I don't have to go through all of them. So in general, wrapping up, I was very excited for the Razer Nabu. I got the beta version, and my excitement drained away. When I heard they were going to do a discount program for the new one, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to give the new one a shot. I'm going to give it a fair shake, gesture control, and see what I think. In general, it's a big improvement. It's much better than the old one, except perhaps for the fact that it's cracked at its seam, because there is, I won't be able to get the camera to see it, but that is a seam on this one as well, so over time that might crack open. But the build quality feels nicer, but the rubber feels the same, which is a concern. The clasp is much better, the button is better on the side, except there's only one, the screen still looks nice, there's less functionality to the button. Overall, the build quality is amazing. I think. It feels nice, it looks nice. Time will tell. People had buttons fall off on the old one, who knows for the new one. In terms of functionality, there are things that are much better about it. The fitness app is much more accurate, but it's still not the most accurate you can get. At the price, probably pretty good, but there's still Fitbit. You can probably get a Fitbit for pretty close to this now, even if you're getting an older version. They didn't add a heart rate monitor. That would have been a lot more. They didn't add GPS. That would have been a lot more. Keeping it on a budget means sacrificing functionality. It's definitely a casual fitness device. In terms of other apps, notifications work fine most of the time, but sometimes do not. Battery lasts much, much longer. Fantastic aspect of it. But syncing and connection to the phone seems to be spotty. Seems to have big issues still. And without instructions in the manual or the app itself to tell me how I'm supposed to be monitoring that, even if it really tells me how to maintain it, that's much better than just leaving it as a mystery and me losing over a week of data. It's advertised as live smarter. Honestly, this is not a smart band to me. Just because it gets notifications from my phone that I can dismiss, which do not really dismiss them from my phone because they're still there to display on my lock screen, it doesn't make it a smart band. I don't know anyone else who has one, so I couldn't try out the pulse functionality. I don't know how they interact with each other. I don't know if I could shake someone's hand and actually add our Twitters together, follow each other, whatever it is. So I'm going to stop wearing this. That's my my final call, if you want to call it. I'm not going to give it a rating of numbers or stars or thumbs up or thumbs down. The big indication of whether I think this is worth this, at least for me, is I'm going to go back to wearing a normal watch instead of the Nabu. Because the fitness functionality is not good enough for me to really want to keep wearing it for that reason. I run using Nike Plus. It's much more accurate. Uses my phone's GPS. I don't need an all-day step counter. I can just go for a run. I can get another kind of pedometer. I can use my phone as a pedometer, and it'll be more accurate. That's the sad part, is the casual functionality of this is better on my phone, on most phones. And it really didn't add anything to my life. It's nice to get a notification on my wrist. Didn't save me that much time. Without any other functionality, without strong app support. So for you, if you want a casual fitness counter, notifications at your wrist, at a budget price compared to the others, not bad. It looks good, and it works for that, for the most part. If you're looking for more, if you're looking for a heart rate monitor, if you're looking for very clear, specific, accurate fitness counting, if you're looking for more app functionality, if you're looking for the ability to read an entire text that's more than a sentence long, something I didn't mention, this device is not for you. Personally, I do not recommend the Razer Nabu. Hopefully, future versions will be better. But for now, I just don't think it's up to snuff. So, I'm Chris Krieger, and that was my rambling, ranting review of the Razer Nabu. If you have any questions or feedback for me, please leave them in the comments. Be respectful, and I'll respond. I may or may not pick it up again in the future. I said this for the last Nabu. After they do some updates, and see if they can improve it through software and firmware. And I might do another review then. But for now, I'm going to be done with the Razer Nabu. Please don't ask if I'm going to sell it to you. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet. But it's my final call. I do not recommend the Razer Nabu as a device to make you live smarter. It is not smart band I can say is worth it. Thank you. See you next time.